A partial government shutdown appears more likely as Democrats have rejected the latest proposal from Republicans regarding Homeland Security funding. Here to break down what comes next and what DHS's near future looks like is the Hill's House leadership reporter, Emily Brooks. Hey, Emily. So, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer and House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries put out a statement last night which heavily criticized the Republican proposals as incomplete and insufficient. What are they demanding moving forward, and how are Republicans responding?
Well, I think the really big question here is what the White House sent back as a counteroffer to Democrats. Both sides are being pretty tight-lipped on what exactly those are. But what we do know is a major sticking point between Republicans and Democrats is the demands from Democrats for enhanced warrant requirements to require judicial warrants rather than administrative warrants for immigration officials to go into people's homes and obtain people for deportation proceedings. And that is a non-starter for Republicans. It's a major ask for Democrats. And so that's going to be difficult to thread that needle. But, we are Tuesday here. Government funding for DHS expires on Friday. And is talk about, well, the Senate is preparing a package to move on short-term funding, temporary funding. We don't know exactly the length of that yet, but that is one option. That's a fallback option. Unclear if that could pass, though, due to opposition from Democrats. And so what all of this is meaning is that we're really barreling towards a likely DHS shutdown unless they can come to an agreement with the White House very quickly here.
Yeah, I imagine there is substantial pressure on Democrats not to vote for another continuing resolution. You mentioned that deadline is Friday for DHS funding. If a shutdown does take place, how will that impact the Department of Homeland Security? And you have Republicans saying that ICE won't actually be affected. Is there truth to that?
There is truth to that. So ICE got a major influx of funding in the One Big Beautiful Bill Act that President Trump signed into law, that Republican legislation last year. They got an influx of billions of dollars that should last about 4 years. And so that is, something that Republicans keep on bringing up. They're saying they're not actually defunding ICE. They're just defunding all of these other important agencies under DHS that will actually affect real Americans if the funding for those does lapse. This is TSA agents, FEMA, the Coast Guard. Those are the really big areas that Republicans keep pointing to. And so there is some sort of a question about whether Democrats would agree to move funding to just fund those critical agencies while waiting on ICE official funding and Customs and Border Protection. So there's some question there. However, that does leave them with less leverage in these funding negotiations if they fund part of DHS and not the others, because, like we just said, ICE is already funded.
Would Republicans go along with a Democratic effort to carve out immigration aspects of DHS funding and fund other parts of the agency?
Well, Leader Thune in the Senate was asked about this last week by our own Al Weaver here, and he was not inclined to support that. He said, oh, well, so Democrats want to just defund law enforcement, is what he said, kind of quipped there. And so that is going to be a tough vote for Republicans as well. And they want to get this done. And over in the House, the House already passed a full year DHS funding bill. And so they're hoping that maybe with enough pressure or leverage that comes through, or there could be an agreement that comes to very quickly and they can make some minor adjustments to that in the Senate and then send it back and not have to redo a whole bunch of bills with just funding partial agencies. So there's just a lot up in the air, and there are a lot of different avenues that Congress could potentially go. But one thing is for sure is that a full DHS short-term continuing resolution is going to be probably pretty hard to get past the Senate and the House and onto President Trump's desk. And that would be a big decision for Democrat centrists if they would want to do that, particularly in the Senate.
The leaders of ICE and Customs and Border Protection are testifying on Capitol Hill today. This is their first testimony since the fatal shootings of Renee Good and Alex Preddy in Minneapolis. Could their testimonies play into this funding battle?
Certainly, it's going to be an opportunity for Democrats to press them on a lot of these decisions and what's going on, and how many of these decisions are coming from them, how many are being directed by DHS Secretary Kristi Noem and the White House. There has been reporting in some other outlets about who is exactly doing what. Why are Border Patrol agents assisting in interior enforcement and not on the border? There's a lot going on there. But certainly, if they do provide some answers that could say, we have changed this practice, we have moved people we have moved agents away from Minneapolis, we have changed our practices on this and that, we support body cameras, things like that, potentially. Those are things that maybe more centrist Democrats could point to and say, well, if we can't get legislation on a deal for some of these certain things in law and in writing, they could point to that to say, well, they're confident in the administration changing those policies. That's a lot. That's pretty theoretical, though. And I don't think that Democrats, at least right now at this stage, are in any real mood to give any concessions to Republicans, especially in light of this testimony.
What should we be keeping an eye on in the coming days as Democrats and Republicans try to work out and find a way to avoid another government shutdown?
Yeah, certainly any positive words coming from Democrats, signs of progress, negotiations. Even the statement from Schumer and Jeffries batting down the White House counterproposal, they said that they wanted more information from the White House. And so that's an indication that they're not necessarily at a stalemate. And the fact that there is some communication happening is a positive sign for negotiations and for them getting to an ultimate resolution. So that's what to look out for. I think if Democrats back away from demands for those judicial warrant requirements, or if they ramp those up, that could be pretty critical for whatever prospects there are for a deal. And if there are things, of course, what we're going to be waiting to hear from the White House and what they say specifically about what they can and cannot accept, that's going to be pretty important as well. So there's a lot to go, but it is pretty interesting negotiations since this is happening between the White House and Senate Democrats, and a lot of House lawmakers, House Republicans, and even Senate Republicans are largely being cut out at this, and they're just sitting back waiting to say, okay, White House, if you can figure this out, we'll try and get to yes for you. But it's been pretty different than a lot of the other negotiations that have happened on Capitol Hill for funding battles so far, such as in the last shutdown, the record shutdown, that was all between congressional leaders. Well, the White House took a back seat in that one.
All right, a story that we will continue to follow leading up to that deadline at the end of the week. But for now, we'll leave it at that. Emily Brooks, thank you.
Thank you.